All right, we are live. We live, Shayshawn, Pastor Shayshawn. Hello, welcome to Theology on Thursdays. Woo, woo.
Good evening.
Good evening. Oh, we're here. We're here. Please like, share, invite people to join us. We are here at our church, and we are going to have a dynamic discussion on this evening. February, our theme is Dominion, and because we're in the Love Month, we're looking at relationships, and so we started with Dominion in my family, Dominion in my marriage. Last week, my husband and Pastor Deshawn, our spiritual son, got on to talk about spiritual fathers and sons. We are off to a great start. And on tonight, we're going to talk about mother and daughter, spiritual mother and daughter relationship. So come on in. Let me see who's on with us. Isaiah just shared. Hey, Isaiah. Isaiah is here.
I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good conversation.
Yes. I'm excited too. We learned, we've been, well, I'm not going to talk about the years because we'll talk about that, but we learned today that this is actually probably our first time teaching together. Yes. Because typically we will tag off or pass assignments, but this is our first time teaching together, so super excited about this on tonight. It's happening. All right, let's see who's on. Oh, I told my daughter Deidre is downstairs, so I told her I would shout her out. We love you, Deidre.
Hi, Deidre.
We love you so much, her and Naomi. Let's see who is on. Let's see. Deidre. Oh. We are winning. I love this. See Pastor Deshawn looking at us like, sorry.
Thanks, Mom.
You're welcome. Gotcha, girl. All right, our Essie is on. Our daughter Essence, daughter Jasmine. Hey. D3. Hi, baby Dwayne is on. Baby. Dr. Dwayne is on. We love you. Love you, babe. All right. Say hello when you come in. Thank you for joining us. Please like and share. All right, Nisha's on. Hey, sis.
I love you.
What did you say, sis? I love you, Mish. She's one of our spiritual daughters as well. Thank you so much for joining us. We're missing our chuckle. Yeah, look, I literally was saying that. We're missing it. We're missing one of our chuckles. Look, you can, Essie, I'm telling you, so funny. So funny. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're super excited about being able to dive into our content. Please like, share, tag people in the comments. I believe we're going to have a robust, beautiful discussion on tonight. So let's go ahead and dive in. I feel like there was such a strong foundation laid last week with Apostle Dwayne and Pastor Deshawn. Wasn't that conversation good?
It was so good.
It was so good. And so we've got big shoes to fill. We were joking about that. We have big shoes to fill on tonight. We're going to do our part in the sentence of impartation. So I'm going to say that again. We're going to do our part tonight in the sentence of impartation through the vehicle of Theology on Thursdays. All right? So again, our topic is spiritual mothers and daughters. And I want to start off just kind of piggybacking off of some of what was shared from last week's conversation. I want to start by saying that you're going to experience or hear some things that could be considered overlap as we get towards the end of our lesson, but there will be some things that are distinct from a mother and daughter perspective. Now, we know in the spirit that there is no gender. So, we've been taught by Paul that there is no Jew, nor Greek, male or female in the spirit. However, we also know that we were made in the image of God, male and female, okay? Meaning that there are characteristics that God, that exists in God's expression that are both male and female. And I'll use the name of God, El Shaddai, which means God of the mountains or the many-breasted one. We also see Matthew 23, so we see it in the name of God. That in creation, so let me back up. We see it in creation. We see it in the name of God in El Shaddai. And we also see it in Matthew 23 in Jesus. We hear him saying that he could have gathered Jerusalem's children as a hen would gather her chicks, okay? So we see that expression of the feminine in God We see it in the name of God. We see it in Jesus in his conversation around Jerusalem's children. And we also see in Psalm, it says that when my mother and father, or when your mother and father forsakes you, then the Lord will take you up. That means that in him is the ability to address both, okay? So I just kind of wanted to walk through that. As we talk about some of the distinctions in the spiritual mother, spiritual daughter relationship, in contrast to some of what you all learned on last week with the dynamic discussion with Apostle Dwayne and Pastor Deshaun. So you know that we like to start off by, did you want to say anything to open up? Because I kind of just started talking.
No, I think that was a great foundation. And I think what they talked about last week kind of still applies to our conversation today. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad we started out kind of opening up, keeping the idea in mind that there is no gender in the spirit. So we're just kind of adding on and building onto what they talked about last week.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to start with laying the foundation. We always believe in the Destiny Global community that we start off by laying a formal definition. And we do this because we want to make sure that we're all launching from the same thought. And so we wanted to make sure that we define covenant on tonight. Covenant is an agreement, okay, or to agree by lease, deed, or legal contract. Pastor Deshaun is looking for the sound, and it is my bracelet because I have it on today. So I'm just going to take it off. Hilarious. Okay, so I'm just going to take it off. There we go. Problem solved. Okay. So talking about covenant, we have the natural definition. And I want to say this about covenant in our society or in the church context today. Covenant has been given a bad rep. Okay, we see so much infighting. We see just horrible narratives around the benefits of covenant or the dynamics of covenantal relationships, specifically in the umbrella of spiritual parenting. And so I want to say on tonight, and I want you all to hear this, that covenant is still a spiritual principle that impacts natural life. I'm going to say that again. It's divine, so it's a spiritual principle that impacts natural life or natural relationships. We see this with Ruth and Naomi in the scripture. So Ruth 1, 6 through 17, Ruth tells Naomi, her Israelite mother-in-law, where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. Okay? And so covenant, it is real and it impacts lives.
Yes, and the next point is covenant is cut more and cut in different ways. So What does that mean? It's diversity in covenant. Every relationship with a spiritual mother and daughter or spiritual father and son, whatever they may look like, can look differently. Yes. The example I want to use is Jesus' relationship with Peter, James, and John. All of those relationships look different. His requirements of them look different. Things, if you look at the different examples of even just the types of questions he asked them in the Bible. There were all different questions germane to what he saw in them and what their destiny and their purpose is. So every relationship will look different and have a different context. So you never want to think that everything applies to every single person.
Yeah. Can I say something about that too? Yes. I think a lot of times we are okay with that in a natural context, but when it comes down to the spiritual community or spiritual relationships, we feel as though that it has to be the same. So a parent can address a natural child based on what they like, their tendencies, all of that. So for example, if a child has a favorite color of purple, your favorite color. In the world, it's fine if we lean into that. However, in the spiritual context, we get up in arms where there's diversity in how the relationships evolve or what's given to one versus the other. But it is biblical, like you said. There's dimensions to covenant. There's differing rules and dynamics of relationships, and it really is a spiritual thing. And I think that those examples that you gave were very good.
Very good, yes. And I think, and I'll even speak to specifically to Apostle Cheryl. She does very good with identifying the different things and the different needs in different sons and daughter relationships, to hone in on the different ways that she needs to, that relationship may need to look. Also, and there is a responsibility with covenant.
Yeah.
So it's not something that is easy, simple, straightforward. It's a real thing. It's spiritual and it is natural.
Yeah.
So you have a responsibility to hold up your end of the bargain, because, like we mentioned,
say that again. Like there's responsibility.
There's responsible. Yeah. You have to hold up your end of the agreement, even though it's not something that we're legally signing. When you come into a covenant with a spiritual mother, you do have to hold up your end of the bargain.
Yeah, very good, very good. And there are different types of covenants. Would you like to walk through just some of the covenants that exist in the Bible?
Yes, so there are a few different types in the Bible that we're going to briefly talk about. The first one is the Noahic covenant. This is found in Genesis 9, and is made between God and Noah. And this is after the Great Flood. Another example is the Abrahamic covenant, found in Genesis 12. It's covenant with Abraham, where he promises lands, descendants, and the blessings. Everybody know the blessing of Abraham, right? The Mosaic covenant, made at Mount Sinai with Moses and the Israelites, including the giving of the 10 commandments. The Davidic covenant, found in 2 Samuel chapter 7, is a covenant between God and King David, promising an eternal dynasty. And then lastly, last example is the New Covenant, mentioned in Jeremiah 31. Is also in this New Covenant, in Hebrews 8 as well, associated with Jesus Christ and establishment of a new covenant through his sacrifice.
And we wanted to make sure that we walk through this, because a lot of times when you're hearing conversations specifically in the church culture context, people say that the spiritual mother and father dynamic is made up, right? But it is a principle that sits and expresses itself in that relationship. So covenant is real. We see it in both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it is, again, alive today, okay? So while the cutting of covenant in biblical times often involved like animal sacrifice and that type of thing, where they would sacrifice the animal, they would walk between the divided halves. There's also variations in covenants and in the ways that they were made. And so here's some additional methods for that you could find in biblical times for coming into covenant. And so we're still reinforcing the validity of covenant and the variation of covenant, okay? So there was meal sharing, the exchanging of gifts and tokens, ceremonial acts, and then swearing oaths, okay? And so in that, you come into a familial dynamic in your relationship through the vehicle of covenant. So we literally are family. For our purposes in our relationship, we use language in DGC in our community that we do life and purpose. And so it's not just connected to the spiritual dynamic, but it's connected to the natural life as well. And I'm going to say that again. It's not just connected to the spiritual dynamic, but I care about Shanti's life.
Absolutely.
I care about Amari, right? I'm showing up when she has dances and I'm taking pictures in real life, okay? Wow. So it's real. So we become family, and it's a spiritual and natural connotation. Not to take away from natural parents. Pastor Dwayne and Pastor Deshaun talked about that some last week, but we become family. Okay. So example of what that looks like in the Bible, where there were strong relationships that may not have been connected by blood, but became family. We have David and Jonathan, Ruth and Naomi. We have the 12 disciples that became part of the founding family, if you would, of the New Testament of church. We have us as believers being engrafted into the family of God, okay? And so that is some specific context to lay the foundation of the validity of covenant, of the expression of covenant. And so we wanted to also take time to talk about our journey in covenant, so that we can glean through some of the good, some of the bad,
Oh my goodness. So as you were working.
That we've been doing this together, but our relationship started in October of 2025. So we have been in covenant. Oh my God, what did I say? 2025. I am in the future and I look so much better than I do right now. So 2015, y'all, I'm tired. It's been a week. 2015. And so the beginning of our relationship began as a mentorship and then evolved. I was actually part of a spiritual community and accepted an assignment to be Pastor Shanti's mentor. And eventually I actually became her actual pastor as my relationship in that covenant community evolved and my assignment was to be her pastor. And so we were working in that capacity for a while. And you want to talk about your dream?
Yes. So
that kind of changed some of that dynamic.
So I think we only had one mentorship meeting before she became my pastor.
It was quick,
It
right?
was very quick. I think
Such a divine moment.
Yeah, it was
January 5th. You know, I always remember that date.
So before she became my pastor, I was serving in an administrative position mainly. And then I had a dream one night. She was walking with two other ladies, and I was just sitting down on the couch. And she walked up to me, and she was like, "Do you want to come with me and come closer?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I stood up, and I walked with her. And so I told her about the dream the next day, and then she was like, "Oh, I was just talking to God about who would be coming closer and walking with me." And from that point moving forward, we've been walking closely together.
And so I want to say just a few highlights from that. The Holy Spirit will bear witness to what should be covenant, okay? And it takes the awareness of both parties in order to come into that agreement. It's one thing to be mentored from someone by afar, right? You can have many tutors, many governors, but the Bible says you don't have many fathers, okay? And so there is a covenant is a step apart from a casual connection, and the Holy Spirit will breathe witness to the dynamic of the relationship. And so we served together for a while in ministry, and we did life and purpose. And so I had a chance to learn about Shanti's story. She had a chance to learn about just some of my journey. And I think that's one of the beautiful benefits in establishing a covenant relationship is that you really get line of sight into the journey that the individual had. It's my responsibility as a spiritual mother to understand why Shanti functions the way she functions. It's my responsibility to have understanding and hear this, because a lot of times we just lock ourselves into spiritual insight, but I would do her a disservice as a spiritual mother if I did not understand her story and her history and why she functions the way that she functions. And so I wanted to put that out there because a lot of times everything else kind of gets dismissed from that context, but I am invested in Shanti as a person and not just her gift. And so that means that I ask questions. I learn about her family, tell me about this, And so, we did the work to establish the foundation.
And if I can add to that, more so, you've never focused on trying to create another Cheryl.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no.
I think sometimes...
Oh, go ahead.
Sometimes people sometimes may say, "Oh, well, you may sound like her or act like her or whatnot," but Apostle Cheryl has always pushed me to bring out the inner Shanti and the gifts that I naturally have, so that I can grow and from that place and not trying to be like her, but be the person who God's original intent for me.
Yes, God's original intent. Yeah, very good. And so we talked to you just now about the beginning. So we have some B's, we like alliteration here. So we talked to you a little bit about the beginning of our journey. And now we're going to walk you through the breach in our relationship, because hear me, covenant will be tested. And so our 9 years of doing life together has been tested. It has not been smooth sailing. And, God bless anyone whose covenant has not been tested. I probably want to sit down and interview you or something, because it's just not normal. But, and I'm sure things do exist like that, right? But covenant will be tested. And so we experienced a massive breach in our relationship. I'll frame it like this without going into a lot of the details. I had asked for something to be done. She did not hear me when I said it. I did not go back and inspect it. And as a result of that, we had a lot of things that we needed to navigate through. And in the process of navigating through that, I was experiencing deep hurt. She was experiencing deep hurt, and that was separated. We had some time of separation in our relationship. Brutal stuff, nothing easy. And where in that time, I can talk from my perspective, and then you can jump in and share. So during that time for me, I was questioning the context of our covenant. If it had ended, right? If I had mismanaged our relationship, if I had missed something, all of these things I was actually navigating through as we were working through a relational breach. So talk about some of the things that you experienced during that time.
Definitely the same thing, and one of the recurring things I kept thinking through was, how people always say, well, people can come into your life for a season. Yeah. And I kept saying, okay, well, was this a seasonal relationship?
Oh, that's so good. And, so good.
I think a lot of times, especially at the beginning of a year, people say, oh, well, cut off people that aren't serving you or who aren't, going the same places you're going. Mm-hmm. And, I had to really just go to God, and because I could not let outside voices control the decisions that I was making and where I felt like God was calling me to go in my future and who I was called to walk with. Yeah. So I had to hear from God for myself for what we should do moving forward.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And so I think a lot of times people don't talk about those things, right? Where if you are in covenant, it requires you to bring back the relationship dynamic to God and say, this is where we are right now, right? This is what you said. This is what I believe you said. And therefore, I have a responsibility to present this relationship and this situation that we're navigating through back to you, okay? And so we did recover, okay? Clearly, we're sitting here. But I wanted to say that in the recovery process, because, again, covenant will be tested, there's responsibility. So we had to have, number one, we had to do the spiritual work, so dealing with unforgiveness, dealing with hurt and pain, and all of the soul injuries that can come from any type of breach in covenant or impact to the relationship. But again, it's not just the spiritual component. Again, in covenant, it's the natural component as well. So we did the work. We had the conversations. I feel like the first conversation that we had was on FaceTime when we first started trying to work our way back to God's original intent for our relationship. And we probably just cried.
We did. I think we cried the entire conversation.
And we had hard conversations. We asked questions. What happened? What did this look like? And we had to take time to dig through those things. And so if you're sitting here watching and you know that God has called you in covenant relationship with someone, all right, and there has been a breach, I want to say to you that it is possible to recover, number one. And number two, I want to challenge you on tonight to not dismiss what God has divinely orchestrated or called. So I'm going to say that again. Don't dismiss what God has divinely orchestrated or called, okay? And so have the conversations. A lot of times, specifically in a church context, we'll spiritualize or over-spiritualize the reconnection or the reestablishment of a relationship. We'll shout over it. We'll worship over it, we'll speak in tongues and hug and then try to move on from whatever that breach would be. But I want to challenge us to soberly survey the relationship and do the work that's necessary to recover it. So I'm going to say that again. I want to challenge us to soberly do the work, not just over spiritualize, but we had hard conversations. Yes. We had several meetings. We went out to eat.
Conversations. And I can speak for myself. I am, especially then, gosh, I've grown so much. I hated having hard conversations. And if you truly believe that God is in a relationship and God's desire is for that relationship to continue, you have to have the hard conversations. I think sometimes people out of a place of fear of losing the relationship, or what could happen, maybe how the person responds, or for whatever reason, sometimes people don't want to have hard conversations. But in order to have a healthy covenantal relationship, you have to do that so that you can be open and honest with.
So do the spiritual work, do the natural work. And then we had to reestablish our relationship, right? We didn't jump back into our normal dynamic, right? We had to work through the awkward times. We had to work.
It was awkward.
Yeah, it was. You're kind of like going in for the hug, like, oh, no, right. That was so funny. That was fun. Okay, but really, it's awkward when you're recovering relationship and reestablishing what the dynamic is going to look like. And I really want to press into this. I really feel God on it. Some of you have thrown away covenant relationships because it's hard to restore. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. And so on tonight, I pray for your heart. And I pray for your human capacity. So again, I pray for your heart and I pray for your human capacity to be able to do the work, to be what God has called you to be in the context of a covenant relationship. Okay? So covenant can recover. It can recover. What's next?
Absolutely. All right. So what is next? We're going to talk about...
Did we talk about rebuilding trust? A little bit. So let's talk about some of the practical ways, because again, we don't want to over spiritualize. We had a natural project management flow. We had to get that back together, right? We had to reestablish
asking questions.
Asking questions, making sure we were clear on what expectations were, right? And making sure that we put the checks and balances that were necessary in our current dynamic where they weren't in the last place, where the enemy was able to slip in, right? And so being able to rebuild that trust, it did not happen overnight. I know that maybe there's some supernatural processes where the trust is restored immediately. That was not the case with us.
Right.
We had to do the work and rebuild and regain that trust. Shanti can walk in my house. She has the code to everything, right? And so we are here by the grace of God. And so it is possible to recover and it is possible to rebuild trust.
I want to add something here. Also, I can speak for myself. What helped me is choosing to, one, not be offended.
Yeah, that's so good.
And not to keep rehearsing the past.
So good.
Because I think when you have such a massive breach like we did, and when your soul is as hurt as mine was, I can speak for myself, sometimes I found myself rehearsing what was happening and rehearsing the feelings that I felt and rehearsing everything that I went through when we disconnected. And you can find yourself in a place extending the awkwardness because you're rehearsing how you felt, or you keep thinking about old thoughts, and something small could happen that nobody meant anything about, and offense can slip in and then extend awkwardness, or maybe even lead to another breach. So choosing to not be offended and not rehearsing the old feelings and the hurt and the pain. And
so good. So listen, practical steps, because covenant will be tested. How do you recover when there's a breach? So you want to make sure that you're rebuilding trust, having hard conversations. Be spiritual, right? So seeking the face of God, but yet not over spiritualizing, and being able to do both the natural work and the spiritual work to recover. And then moving forward, right? And making sure that you're able to harvest the history. So I'm going to say that again. Being able to make sure you can harvest the history and also handle the future. So again, harvesting the history and being able to handle the future is how you move forward. All right. Very good. Oh, I'm next. Okay. Let me come off of this and come back to my notes. So let's talk about some things that are part of the mother's role. And I'll talk from just my perspective, things that are germane to my commitment in the spiritual mother and daughter, or mother and son dynamic, mother and daughter for this conversation. One of the things that I'm intentional about providing is nurture. And I'll start there, making sure that I am tending to the spiritual well-being and the natural well-being of those that God has entrusted to my care. And so I'm finding out how work went, what's going on with you, how's your health, how's your soul, because it's not just about the natural things, the spiritual things, but also about the natural things as well. And then the spiritual connotation to that nurturing is being able to, and I'll say it like this, nurture the nature. So nurture the nature. So making sure that I'm aware of the makeup, the tendencies, the patterns, I'll use my husband's word, the proclivities, and being able to nurture Shanti, Pastor Shanti, to her fullest potential, so that every divine seed that rests on the inside of her has the ability to blossom. And so we're going to prune where we need to prune. We're going to pour water on the areas that we need to pour water into, because there is an expected harvest that God is looking for from her life. And so as her mother, I have to make sure I'm tending to her life in a way where I'm nurturing her to be all that God has called her to be. And that is apart from me. Hear that, because I actually saw a, oh my God, are we at past? We're right at 8 o'clock. I was looking at my time, right? So I actually saw a clip from, I think it's Pastor Tim Ross, where he talked about this spiritual, did you see that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, this spiritual parent dynamic, and how we don't have it right in the church because we are only looking for people to stay in the house. So I am not confining Pastor Shanti to my field, okay, or our house. I am nurturing everything on the inside of her so that she has her full capacity, so that she has her full expression in the earth as God has designed, okay? And will you hear the impartation that has been happening over these 9 years in her? You'll see it in the marketplace, absolutely. But in addition to that, you will also see the expression that is purely Shanti, because I've watered the seeds that God had placed on the inside of her before she was in her mother Tammy's womb. Yes. So also another thing is being able to introduce seasons and give language. I feel like if I could track back over the years, that there's been moments that I've called and said X, Y, and Z. And in a few days or a few moments, and this happens often, I'll be like, so I was sitting here, have you thought about da-da-da-da? Literally, and it will literally open up. Yeah, and so that is part of the dimension of covenant and a spiritual mother and daughter relationship, the ability to introduce seasons and to give language for the dynamics of those seasons. And then also the last thing that I'll say is that I get to carry, just as a woman would in her womb, I get to carry Shanti, Pastor Shanti. And I'll use that in the place in the spirit. So I am responsible for having a clue with where she is. So if something's going on, now listen, how can I say this? I'll say this responsibly. In covenant, we should not always have to discern, right? We should have a strong enough relationship where we can have conversation around some things, but there's also a requirement for me to be sensitive enough to Holy Spirit, because I'm carrying her in the womb of my assignment, to be able to pick up where she is and minister to her, even if she does not wave the SOS. Did you want to add anything to any of that?
Yes, absolutely. To your last point, I want to add, so she pastored me for the first, 3 or 4 years from a different state, okay?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
She lived in Pennsylvania, and I lived in Virginia. And speaking of carrying me in the spirit, I'll never forget, and this one very, very, very dark season of my life. She called me and she said, "What's wrong?" I was like, "What?" She was like, "You're so sad. I don't understand. Like, what's wrong?" Wow. And I was I'm not gonna cry.
Woo. I know. I thought you. I was like, "Woo, I'm gonna cry too." See that carrying thing? Okay, come on, we gotta step back. Our son is behind the camera, and he's mocking us, but we're stepping back.
I was so depressed.
Okay.
I mean, beyond depressed. And she was all the way in Pennsylvania, and we had not talked. And matter of fact, I feel like it was soon after. It was within a year of, maybe a year or so, maybe 2 years or so, of us reconnecting. And she was living in Pennsylvania, and she sensed that something was wrong with me, and in that moment she was able to speak to what I was dealing with and what I was going through, referred me to a therapist. And yeah, I mean, it was the beginning of me coming out of a very, 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 very dark place. So
yeah. It's good. All right, your thoughts.
All right,
on the daughter's role. You got to recover here.
I know, right? Okay. The daughter's role. The first thing is to support. My sister Jessica actually.
Pastor Jess, we love you. She's another daughter.
That's my sister. I love you, Pastor Jess.
Can I say one thing that I love is that in our context, when we have spiritual sons and daughters, they actually do become siblings. Absolutely. And it is such a beautiful thing that we've been experiencing. But go ahead.
My little brother. No. I love my sister, Pastor Jess. I can say that she taught me this for sure. Being able to not only just pray and cover, because Pastor Tashana and Apostle Dwayne spoke about that last week, but be sensitive enough to hear from God about how to support your leader.
Oh, that's
and
good.
You're a spiritual mother. Specifically when it comes to my mother. She's amazing. Anybody who knows her, she's like a superwoman, and she can do all things.
By the grace of God, in my best Apostle Melvin Thompson voice.
And sometimes I literally do have to walk in the Spirit in order to figure out a way to support her in the best way that it will be the best kind of help. Whether that is just going to pick up baby Dwayne randomly at 12 o'clock when she's at 12:30 jumping on a call, you know.
It does. I'm like, oh, that was so nice. How did you know? Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. Here's this bag.
It's literally, it's little things. Knowing how, perfect example. This past, when was that? Was that December when we did the photo shoot?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. Now I'm gonna cry. Okay, go ahead. All right, we gonna thug it out. We got this.
We haven't cried. We can
do this. All right. Pastor Deshaun does not believe it, so you guys can saw his face. We're gonna do this.
December, I wanted to get her something for Christmas, and I was tired of thinking about it, to be honest. And I was like, you know what? I said, she hasn't taken any pictures with all of, because you know she got 5 kids, y'all.
We got a lot of babies.
With all of her children, her entire family, ever, because baby Dwayne is a baby. You know, so and you know, as you know, they have a blended family, so we have a few different households, we have different states,
all the things,
all of the things, and I made it my mission to arrange to get all of the children, both Apostle Wayne and Apostle Cheryl, together in one place in the same outfit with a photographer.
Ruined me. Okay. Yeah, I still randomly think about it, like, for real. Yeah.
But knowing I really wanted to do something for her, which is not a spiritual thing, you know, but it was something for her as a person, as a mom, as a wife, that I knew that she would appreciate, because she does so much for her family all of the time. And I wanted to be able to do that for her. So really being able to support in any way that God may tell me to do. Like, sometimes I don't know. Like, God does tell me to just go to her house, and it may just be something simple, but being able to walk with God to hear how to support in the best way.
Yeah.
Number 2 is to extend her legacy. So, you know, we're an apostolic house, and she's building and planting things in the earth, but also, God has spoken to me about things. And as I continue to birth things into the earth, it's an extension of what, she has poured into me. And I consider it an honor to not disgrace her name, because she does put her name on me. And so
that's a big conversation that you just opened up. Being number one, trustworthy enough to be able to carry portions of the grace, the name, the work, and having a sensitivity to know. I love that you said it, to be sober and carrying that out in the earth. It's
Absolutely.
So good.
And even though, my name may be on things, but I'm Apostle Cheryl's spiritual daughter, so I consider that when I am, putting things into the earth. So it is an extension of her legacy. Number 3, showing up.
So good. Yeah, so good.
Spiritual daughters, spiritual sons.
So good.
We show up when we don't feel like it. We communicate if we can't show up, but we show up. We figure out a way. You make it happen. You fill the gap. You fill the need, and you show up. You show up like this. Spiritual sons, spiritual daughters show up. Lastly, and God actually just mentioned this to me, honesty. If my mother has the responsibility of nurturing what's inside of me and watering the seeds that God has placed on the inside of me, it is my responsibility then to be honest about where I am, what I'm doing. Like Apostle Cheryl knows Shanti, okay? So even when Pastor Deshaun tries to, tell my mom, my spiritual mother, things about me, I'm like, it's fine, she knows.
Yeah, I love it. So let's talk about that, though, because your honesty and transparency in the relationship gives us the ability to maximize it. So I'm going to say that again. Honesty and transparency within the covenant relationship, spiritual parent, spiritual mother and daughter relationship, gives us the ability to maximize and properly cultivate. When you're hiding portions and, having falsehoods, number one, you don't allow that grace to get into all the cracks and the crevices. That can help recover, that can help support. And then also, if there is a track record of dishonesty, eventually the pour is going to slow up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Say that, right? Because we have to be responsible in our dynamic. And sometimes what will happen is that a spiritual parent may hold their hand until the integrity piece can be worked out, okay? Because we want to be responsible for the pour. We want to be intentional about what's being poured.
Absolutely.
And one of the greatest ways to breach that trust is dishonesty. So there's moments where I say, what's happening? And typically, if your spiritual parent or spiritual mother is saying what's going on, we have an idea. Mm-hmm. And so it's just best, to be honest.
Just be honest.
Just be honest.
I mean, it's been times. And it happened very early on for us. Like, it was like day 2. So, Shanti. Yes.
Remember the whole, Okay. Yeah. So be honest in your relationship so that you can get the benefits, so you can reap the full benefits.
Absolutely.
And then also, for me, I didn't jump in here now, but it goes both ways, because there's moments where I may not want to burden Shanti with something that I'm working through, and I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I have learned to be able to say, okay, so this is what's going on. This is what I'm navigating through. Yeah. X, Y, and Z, right? And so it really does go both ways.
And I wanted to add to that as well. I feel like they touched on this a little bit last week, but really seeing your spiritual parents as humans.
That's good, yeah.
Right? So what does that mean? She is a mom. She is a wife. She has a very high-level job. She is a mentor. And because I do walk closely with her, I get to see all aspects of her life. So I can kind of clue into, okay, well, I also manage her calendar, so but that's only.
Yeah. Your father ain't told she's a cook. God, I'm sorry.
She's a great cook, though. So cooks very good. But being aware that she still has her natural things that she has to take care of. And reality is, like, our dynamic will never supersede what she has to take care of. And I think sometimes spiritual children can become
okay.
Spiritual children have a need and they have a desire to grow and to want more. I'll say that.
Yeah.
And
then there's maturity. So what you're really outlining is a level of maturity in the relational dynamic to be able to discern what you would. Yeah. Amen. We gave ourselves some rules as we were starting this conversation. All right. Let's talk about what it is not. What it is not. Okay. What it is not.
It is not competition.
We are not in competition. We are in kingdom collaboration because we're called to covenant. I'm going to say that again. We are not in competition. We are in kingdom collaboration because we are called to covenant. That was good. Someone should write that down. We are not in competition. We are in kingdom collaboration because we are called to covenant. And a lot of times in that covenant, spiritual mother and daughter relationship, you start to see competition. I want everything on the inside of her to come out. The purpose room, every business, her marketplace expression, her being dynamic in her marketplace does not take away anything from me in my marketplace assignment. I am celebrating
my job.
I am celebrating every single thing. So it is celebration, not competition.
Absolutely. And I literally, I would not have my current job if it was not for Apostle Cheryl. And she pushes me to, thank you, Lord, to stretch my capacity beyond what I ever considered doing. So it's never a competition within our dynamic or external with other people.
That's so good.
So like I mentioned earlier, that she has a lot of spiritual daughters, spiritual sons, but every single relationship and dynamic is different. Like, our dynamic is completely different from her and Misha, her and Pastor Jess, her and Pastor Deshawn. Everybody's relationship is different, and it's never about a competition.
Yeah. It's not competition among siblings. It's complementary grace.
Absolutely.
So with us, it's not competition. It's celebration. And at the sibling level, it's not competition. It's complementary grace. Okay? So good. What's next?
Replacement for natural.
It is not a replacement for her natural parents. Listen, I love Miss Tammy. Okay? And I am for their relationship. I support their relationship. It is first. That is her mother. She birthed her. Okay? And my job is to support that relationship, not replace it. And what I will do by the grace of God is that I will tend to everything that God shows me from my lane. I am not trying to tend to Shanti by jumping into Miss Tammy's lane.
Absolutely.
You got to hear that, okay? So very good, very good.
And lastly, it is not carnal.
It is not carnal. Hear that again. A lot of times, if we are not sensitive to the spiritual dynamic of covenant, it can become carnal. And when you see the covenant changing into carnality, you know that there is mud in the water. Okay? If I will never be to Shanti an excuse for, or build excuses for her carnality or her flesh. I'll say it that way. Nor will I cause that to multiply in her because of mismanagement or harm on my end.
Yeah.
Okay? And I think one of the dangerous things in a spiritual parent dynamic, mother-daughter dynamic, is if we lose track of the divinity of the destination, then the carnality can become king. And so we are on a divine track towards destiny, towards a spiritual destination. And there is no room for carnality to multiply in this relationship. So therefore, offense cannot stay.
Absolutely.
That's why we do the work, right? Therefore, unforgiveness cannot stay. Therefore, as much as I allow her and I'm intentional about her humanity, and, you know, in her humanity, she has space for that. But we not staying in our flesh too long. Yeah. And in addition to that, whatever you need for your soul to be well, we're pressing into that place as well. So anything else you want to share about that? It's not carnal.
It's not
I think it's spiritual. Like, we got to realize that as much as we are led by the Spirit, we should be led by the Spirit in this dynamic as well. Okay. And so what it is, right, we talked about the dynamics of covenant, and it's important to understand what it is not. And I will say this too, that you have to have conversations about what's working and not working in the relationship. You have to come back to it. We've gone through seasons of life together. When I met Pastor Shanti, I was single, had 2 kids, right? Life is completely different now. And so being able to have the conversations that allow the covenant to evolve, that allows safety on both ends as you're navigating through the vicissitudes of life, and staying centered on God's intention will cause covenant to work. Any other thoughts?
Just going back to that original intent when we reconnected, you know, we both separately went to God about what our relationship was supposed to be. Yeah. And I think, and I meant to mention this earlier, prior to launching DGC, CP, our campus pastor.
Oh yeah.
Before I ever knew him, we were on a Zoom, and he was looking at the screen. He said, "Who is this Shanti?"
They called her Shanti, just what they learned.
And he began to give me this prophetic word, and a small piece of that prophetic word was specific to Apostle Cheryl and I's relationship, about us both being attached to each other in order to, me specifically, to get to where God has called me to go. And it was in a season where we had, like I said, it was soon after we reconnected, and it was able to confirm what I knew God had already told me. So.
Yeah, so listen, we get called to covenant by the covenant-keeping God. And when we submit ourselves to the constraints, to the kingdom collaboration, where we minimize carnality in our covenant, we really do set ourselves up to carry each other well and to carry the purpose of God for the covenant in the extension of Christ's image in the earth. And so thank you for joining us for our part of the conversation for Theology on Thursdays. We pray that the information that was shared with you all on tonight, that you were able to extract some jewels from our covenant conversation. We want to invite you to be able to sow and partner with Destiny Global. And so the ways to give are on the screen. You can Cash App at $ Destiny Global Church. You can visit our website. You also have the ability to text any amount to 84321. And so we bless you. I really feel like on tonight that through our conversation that some necessary conversations that need to happen will take place, and that some covenant that has been broken, that has been compromised, will come back to its original intent. And I pray that you all will be able to have a beautiful story like we do in our covenant assignment. And we love you. And God bless. Thank you for joining us. Oh, we did it.
Have a good night.
Have a good night. We love you so much. God bless.